I'll be talking today about one of the Ontario Geological Survey's core mapping programs, the Ambient Groundwater Geochemistry project. I'll talk a little bit about the project in general, and then I'm going to go into one of our recent new mapping initiatives in North Central Ontario. Is that not progressing? There we go. Okay, so we sometimes call this just AGG because it's a bit of a mouthful. So the AGG functions by collecting highly characterized groundwater samples at a uniform density using a standardized protocol. It characterizes the baseline groundwater geochemistry of major rock and overburden units in the province. And this is subject to accessibility because we sample exclusively from pre-existing wells. So where people don't live and aren't drilling wells, we can't get samples. The information collected in the AGG program allows us to relate water chemistry to geology. It supports determination of groundwater flow and aquifer conditions, and it ultimately builds a multi-use publicly accessible database. So the AGG started in southwestern Ontario in 2007, and that was initiated by former senior science leader Stu Hamilton at the OGS. It moved across southern Ontario to begin with, and so the available southern Ontario database boundary is shown on the map there. And the data currently available is in MRD 283 Rev 2, that's on Geology Ontario. There are close to 3,000 sample stations across the south, shown by the little dots. The attempted sample density was trying to collect a sample from a bedrock aquifer and a sample from an overburden aquifer in every 10 by 10 kilometers squared. There are obviously some areas with a higher density, such as in the Niagara Peninsula and in Eastern Ontario, where more detailed characterization was done with collaborators. So if you were able to tune in on Tuesday and hear that great talk by the City of Ottawa, some of this work was going into the Aquifer Capability Screening tool. And so for all of those sampling locations, there's a wealth of geochemical information. The database has 99 chemical parameter fields. So we have information on, concentrations of metals and trace elements, anions, isotopes, gases, radionuclides for some of the more recent samples as well. In 2016, my colleague Kayla Dell started using our methods and moving this program into northeastern Ontario. So this area covers the Manitoulin, Sudbury, North Bay region. So those 460 samples are now available in a new database called MRD 401. So that was released just last year, and it also has all of the comprehensive geochemical analysis for all of those samples as well. So obviously the OGS has put a lot of time and effort into doing this kind of mapping. And it's important because millions of people in the province depend on groundwater every day, as Heather mentioned in her presentation. And water can be very different depending on where you find it in the province and what kind of rock or sediment that groundwater's been sitting in and how long it's been sitting there, interacting with the aquifer matrix, taking on different chemical characteristics. All of these pictures are water that has been encountered through our program. It can look very different. It can have different colors, different levels of clarity, different tastes, smells. It can be bubbly. And these are all the obvious and perceivable differences in groundwater chemistry that we can use our senses to tell. But just as different as it can look, and the things that we can sense about it are the things that you really can't tell. So, for example, this is a map of fluoride across southern Ontario. This is included in the database download, by the way. And with the size of the dot representing the amount of fluoride in the groundwater sample. And obviously, there's these big regional trends that are natural. So you get higher fluoride in southwestern Ontario, and then you can have some sort of pockets in eastern Ontario as well. In southwestern Ontario, we've related that to the Devonian aged rocks in the area, leading to about, I think it was about 40% of the wells we sampled were over the Ontario drinking water standard just due to geological inputs. I threw up just a second example of, this is boron, another parameter that has sort of like these big regional trends that are, you wouldn't be able to see unless you had like a scale of sampling like this. So we have these maps made for all of the different parameters that were sampled, and they're all pre-made and ready in the download on Geology Ontario. So as mentioned, we've got the Northeastern Ontario program outlined in gray there, and we've got Southern Ontario in blue, but there's this gap in between them. And this is where the next, there's two new initiatives, and the next presentation by Laura Hanley will talk about one of them, but the one I'll talk about here is the North Central Project. So it's filling in this gap. It's important because it lends context to the surrounding data sets. So it's going to be done with the same methods and the same density. But it's also an area that is by no means unpopulated. It's still rural, but it is under development pressure and will continue to be so, being so close to Southern Ontario. So it's important to understand the groundwater resources in this area. So I started collecting samples there in 2024 in the area outlined in yellow. That was our Ottawa Valley study area. And then just last summer, we moved into the Turquoise region where we covered North Frontenac, Bancroft, Barry's Bay region. And so I'll just focus on the rest of the presentation, what we've done so far. So we got 243 samples. And there's a few different aspects of the study area that could, lead us to, just could be different geological controls leading to different chemistry. So this is the bedrock geology map that I have up here. And this is in the Grenville Precambrian province. But there's a major division that cuts across the study area. So in the northwest, we have the Central Gneissic Belt, which is these kind of like, orangey pinks up here. And then in the southeast, we've got this Central Metasedimentary Belt, which is a lot more complicated and heterogeneous. And then on top of that, we have a few of these Paleozoic outliers in the dark blue up here in the Ottawa Valley. So that's a potential different inputs to chemistry. This is the superficial geology. There's a lot of bare bedrock or discontinuous drift, but in the Ottawa Valley, we have the westernmost extent of the Pleistocene Champlain Sea and the remaining deposits here in this kind of purpley blue. And those deposits, the glacial marine clays, are known to be a major control on groundwater chemistry further in Eastern Ontario and in Quebec as well. So that is something we're going to look at. And finally, we've got a regional recharge zone in the area. So there's a major topographic high around Algonquin in the west here. They call it the Highlands. And then the Ottawa River, which is the northern boundary of the study area, is going to be a regional discharge zone. So we might be seeing different chemistry along that flow path. So I was hoping to get, a similar density to the surrounding AGG programs. So a bedrock and an overburden sample in every 10 by 10 kilometers. It doesn't ever work out being that neat, unfortunately. So this is what we got, but that is a function of the availability of wells in these more rural areas as we sample further in the north. So this is the existing wells according to the MECP's well water database. And there are just large undeveloped areas, close to Algonquin and close to Bon Echo, where we just really didn't have a lot of sampling opportunities. So that's unfortunate, but is what it is. And the road networks in these more rural areas also kind of lend to it being a little difficult to get around, and it can take a lot of time to navigate between samples. You'll also notice that there's not a ton of overburden wells that we got. We have a lot more of those samples in Southern Ontario, but in the Precambrian Shield and further north, there's a lot of, as mentioned, thin and discontinuous drift. So a lot of people are just going ahead and exploiting the bedrock aquifers instead of having overburden wells. So the chemical suite, once again, is consistent with the surrounding AGG programs, at least the later years. So we analyze for pH, conductivity, temperature, oxidation reduction potential, alkalinity, and hydrogen sulfide on site. And then we send off samples for a comprehensive ICP suite of metals and trace elements, anions, carbon and nitrogen species, bacteria, dissolved gases, isotopes, radionuclides. So for the last few slides, I'll cover some initial results, but the reports are still going out to our 2025 participants who let us sample their wells, so won't be sharing too much on that just yet. But I can share the pH and total dissolved solids, just some very general parameters. So pH is a very important aspect of groundwater chemistry, as it controls the solubility of many things within the water. And we saw quite a range in the study area, especially in the gneissic belt in the northwest, with a range of about almost 5.5 all the way up to 9. Whereas it was a little more circumneutral and more consistent in the metasedimentary belt, but particularly where you have those like that light blue units, which is the Precambrian marbles, and also the Paleozoic outliers. So, there's just more likely there's more carbonate minerals available to buffer pH in those regions, versus in the gneisses and the felsic plutons, there's just maybe less buffering capacity, so a bit more of a range. Total dissolved solids on the right, that's a measure of like the freshness or salinity of the water. And there's actually quite a lot of very dilute water, especially in the gneissic belt and in the highlands, which would be more of a recharge area, so that makes sense. TDS tended to be higher in the metasedimentary belt, being found all the way up to just over 5,000 milligrams per liter. So I think 9 of our samples were no longer considered fresh, but are considered brackish, over 1,000 milligrams per liter. But there's also a relationship not just with bedrock, but with the superficial geology. There tends to be higher TDS, once again, around these glacial marine deposits that were mentioned before. And that makes sense, as they've been found in other areas to contribute dissolved solids to groundwater. Now, just in both areas, we've seen elevated radon and uranium, compared to other parts of the province that we've sampled in. So for Ottawa Valley, we were seeing that both parameters were more elevated in the metasedimentary belt than the gneissic belt. The metasedimentary belt is more known for, having uranium-rich bedrock units, so it would make sense that you'd have more uranium in the groundwater. And as uranium is radioactive, it breaks down and does form radon, giving us some of the higher radon that we've seen in the ambient groundwater program, with the highest one here being about 500 becquerels per liter. And the final little bit of data that I'll share is the fluoride trends. So fluoride tended to be more elevated in the historic bounds of the Champlain Sea, associated with these glacial marine deposits, but also just closer to the Ottawa River. 5 of these, the ones with the red outlines, are over the Ontario drinking water standard of 1.5 milligrams per liter. These also tended to be the older samples. So here on the plot, tritium is a really crude measure of, a rough estimate of groundwater age, with lower tritium tending to mean older water. And so you see the higher fluoride tends to be, associated with older water. And that makes sense, as studies in Eastern Ontario and Quebec have shown that confinement under these thick glacial marine clays can lead to extensive ion exchange and fluoride dissolution, building up elevated levels of fluoride in groundwater. So I hope to be able to share more results in future open house presentations. But for now, our next steps are to continue filling in this gap. So that would be the Muskoka's Parry Sound region for future fieldwork. and hopefully finding opportunities to fill in some of those gaps in the 2024 and 2025 field areas, if we can find them. And then ultimately compiling all of this data together to release a North Central Ontario AGG database. So that's all I have today. We probably don't have time for questions, but you can shoot me an email if you'd like, firstname.lastname@ontario.ca, or we also have a general OGS groundwater email. Thank you.